Written by C.B. Jones. It's not the food, the family, or the football. It goes back to something that happened to me several years ago, back in high school. It was my third year working the annual Turkey Day giveaway, a charity drive put on by several churches and organizations within the community. They gave away free turkeys and other fixings to families in need for the upcoming holiday. I looked forward to this every year. I had ended up here by way of the Junior Rotarians, a club for high schoolers that my mom had encouraged me to join so that I would have something to put on my college and scholarship applications. The meetings and other stuff were bunk, but I really liked the turkey giveaway. I enjoyed going out to the different parts of town that I never would have otherwise, the destitute and poverty-stricken neighborhoods. The experience of the day allowed me to check my privilege and feel grateful for what I had, as cheesy and cliche as that might sound. Besides all that, and perhaps most importantly, we got a day off from school out of the deal. We arrived at the usual spot in the First Presbyterian Church parking lot. The last bits of remaining autumn leaves clung to the trees surrounding the church. The sky was overcast and the air was crisp, but not bitterly cold. It was going to be a good day, a great way to spend the last day before Thanksgiving break. There was a lot of hustle and bustle about, loosely organized chaos. Teenagers in hoodies and leather jackets stood around in groups, tossing footballs and dicking off and laughing and carrying on. The more fastidious among us looked for ways to help out. There were assembly lines of old church ladies and a few middle-aged adults assembling the care packages. A box truck full of frozen turkeys was parked at one end of the lot, and I jumped up into the back and started tossing the frozen birds out to bystanders. Others placed the birds into these cloth reusable grocery bags with a Rotary Club logo on it. Down the line, they put in cans of cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie filling, green beans, and boxes of stovetop stuffing. I began to get into the rhythm of tossing turkeys to my buddy, Scott. It got to where I was hardly looking, and soon there was a clatter from outside the truck. The frozen boulder of a turkey bouncing off the pavement.
Hey, watch it. You almost took my head off with that thing.
Someone cried from down below. Oh shit, oot, I said, not wanting to curse in front of the church ladies. Sorry. I looked down and saw Christy Hancock glaring at me. She had been bending over putting cans in one of the bags when the poultry missile had missed her by that much. I kinda had a thing for her, and even while giving me the death glare, she still looked pretty damn good. It's Scott's fault, I backpedaled. He was supposed to catch the thing. We had a nice groove going and everything.
My bad. My fucking fingers are freezing and I lost my grip.
Scott said while an old lady with an autumnal scarecrow sweater shook her head in disgust at his profanity. Christy had already stormed off to a safer workspace, and we continued the unloading for another hour or so. Then we had the secondary task of reloading the bags into various pickup trucks and vans. I got volunteered to use my truck as a transport vehicle. Once that was done, we were given a list of addresses, and the fun part was about to begin. I was looking forward to seeing the looks on the faces of the people we delivered the packages to. The joy and graciousness. At times, there could be an opposite response. I've remembered from the previous years that I had noticed an apathy from some of the recipients, a sense of entitlement. These folks ordered us around and asked, "Is this all y'all brought?" Barely said thank you or anything. Oh well, couldn't please them all. Whatever they were needing was much more than could be delivered in a grocery bag full of seasonal items. People were grouping up to get in vehicles and start off with their deliveries. I raced to find Scott. Dude, see if Christy wants to go with us. Tell her we'll make it up to her for almost killing her. Scott was closer to her than I was, and at one time had dated one of her friends. Come on, man.
Oh, I see what you're up to. I got you.
I went over to my truck and soon could see Christy and Scott making their way over.
You're riding bitch, though.
I heard her say. The stars had aligned, and it seemed like fortune was on my side. It would turn out that I couldn't have been further from the truth. The poverty that managed to exist right here in our own backyards never ceased to amaze me. How could people live like this? But they did, and they had for the past 2 years I'd been doing this. We carried the bags to houses with boarded up windows and onto sunken-in front porches, through crooked doors and across musty shag carpets and into nicotine-stained kitchens. Recipients smoked cigarettes while wearing oxygen tubes in their nostrils, and an old lady in a Tweety Bird t-shirt poured a tall boy of natural light into a big gulp cup with ice and offered us one. Pit bulls snarled menacingly at us from neighboring yards, and porch sitters that we weren't delivering to eyed us suspiciously. Little kids with dirty faces played in the street and were underdressed for the weather. I couldn't help but think of something I had heard one time. Nobody suffers like the poor. I felt guilty walking around in these places with my $100 sneakers and driving around in the truck my parents helped me purchase. Yet through all of this, we were mostly greeted with smiles, and I sensed a resilience from these folks. The universe had knocked them down, but they were still kicking, still struggling and surviving. Our delivery was a small respite from it all, a gift that would hopefully make them forget their troubles for a bit. There was a unique smell coming from the last house, a burnt smell that just didn't feel right. We could smell from the road. It wasn't, however, the worst smell we had encountered that day. That honor went to the hoarder's house we had delivered to earlier. Piles of newspapers and magazines had lined the porch, and stacks of boxes sat on windowsills, blotting out the light. On the walk up, Christy had caught whiff of something from the opening front door, got nauseous, and darted back towards the truck. Only Scott and I had managed to soldier on towards the homeowner, an obese lady in a wheelchair who was accompanied by a tall, creepy dude with a greasy comb-over and tinted glasses.
Welcome, welcome.
The lady wheezed.
Just set it in there.
I handed Scott my bag and lingered on the porch while a mangy cat with a gooey eye slithered in and out between my legs. He returned to the front porch with a look of pure horror on his face, ran to the curb and dry heaved. What was it? I asked through his loud retches.
You do not want to know.
After the hoarder house, we felt we could handle anything that would be thrown our way. We were wrong. Like I said, we noticed a strange smell at the last house, but let me back up just a bit so you can get a sense of the headspace I was in. I just want you to know how I could have been so careless and ignored every red flag and gotten us into the situation that we never should have been in. We'd ended up with a few extra packages, but only one address left on our list. Somewhere along the way, Christy had ended up in the middle, riding bitch next to me on the bench seat. Scott sat in the passenger seat, dipping snuff and spitting it into an empty Gatorade bottle. Christy's denim thighs were pressed up against mine, and several times I made her laugh and she lightly touched my arm. Scott snuck me a campy wink at my good fortune. I had a nervous feeling in my stomach, but the good kind of nervous, excited butterflies. I wanted to hurry up and get done with the last delivery and maybe see if they wanted to go hang out some more, go eat or something. If I had just a little more time to get comfortable, I felt like I would have the guts to ask Christy for her number. All right, this is it, I said as I counted the address numbers. It was a 2-story wood frame house with faded and peeling white paint. It looked like it may have been a pretty nice place back in the day. A red flag with a crescent and star hung from a pole that was mounted to one of the wooden pillars that flanked the porch's front steps. We hopped out of the truck, and that's when we noticed the smell. A smell like burnt hair and smoke that got stronger the closer we got to the house.
Y'all smell that?
Christy asked, wrinkling her nose.
Smells like roses compared to that one house.
Scott said. We rang the doorbell, and a short little lady with white hair and thick glasses answered the door and stood behind the screen, squinting at us. She looked frail but friendly.
Yes? Oh, you're here with the turkeys. Come in. Come in.
She said and opened the screen. The smoky smell wafted onto the porch.
Guys, I'm gonna wait by the truck. Keep an eye on the extra meals. Make sure they don't get stolen.
Christy said nervously. Okay, be careful. I've got a machete behind my seat if you need it, I said.
A machete?
What? You never know, I replied in a defensive manner. Scott and I followed the little old lady inside. Hardwood floors with throw rugs and old furniture greeted us. Curio cabinets filled with curios, antiques abound. We stood in the foyer for a bit, waiting for our cue.
Nice place you got here,
Scott said.
Thank you, dear. My husband and I have been here for a long time. It's our little nest. Neighborhood's gone to shit. But we can't bear to leave.
You got some place for us to put these? I asked, holding up a bag.
Yes. I needed you strong boys to carry those down into the basement for me. There's a freezer and a pantry down there.
She led us down a narrow hall to a door that opened inwards. The stairs descended down into darkness, the smoky smell wafting out from somewhere down below. I should have stopped right there, told the lady we weren't allowed to go into basements or some other such excuse. But I was distracted and in a hurry, only thinking about potential futures with Christy. I imagined us driving the back roads together, my arm around her as she leaned into me, the smell of her hair as I kissed her neck. I led the way down the steps, my guard down and not even considering how vulnerable this situation could leave me.
There should be a light switch on your left,
the lady called. It was an unfinished basement with a soft dirt floor. My eyes gradually adjusted to the dark and I realized that there was some illumination already within the chamber. Flickering candles cast a dim orange glow on the cinder block walls. In front of me sat someone with their back to me. The chair creaked as the figure rose and turned, and I could make out their profile in silhouette. A long neck leading to a bald, bulbous head with a giant curved nose, back slightly hunched but stature still imposing. I flicked the switch and overhead lights came on, and I could see it all. What I saw in those few seconds I was only able to process and reprocess much later. At the time it was only a series of fractured images, puzzle pieces I couldn't fit together. Lining the walls were frozen turkeys in front of shallowly dug holes, what I later figured were freshly dug graves. Each turkey had a few candles around it. In the back corner to the left was a pile of clothes and a large steel barrel, a turkey deep fryer. There was also a pile of boxes and bags that read Salvation Army and Meals on Wheels America and United Way. I could make out what looked like a human foot sticking out of the deep fryer. The man stood in front of me about 15 feet away, his eyes dark black as he stared. A stubble of gray hair circled his bald head. From his neck and chin hung beefy red flaps of loose, bumpy skin. He had a large pot belly covered in a trail of gray hair up to his chest, and he was wearing nothing but a pair of yellowed tighty-whities and giant brown feathers stuck into the waistband at his rear. His scrawny legs ended in a pair of feet that were split down the middle, toes missing, the big toe and little toe gripping the floor like puny talons. Above both ankles was some type of ligature that secured a shiny 4-inch blade to the back of his legs. What looked like a chewed up and stretched out piece of pink bubblegum hung from his forehead and draped across the giant beak of his nose and flapped around as he hissed at me with a toothless grin and started rushing towards me. I dropped the bag of groceries and canned goods rolled across the floor. From behind me, I heard Scott scream and then something slammed into me as I rolled forward. I hit the ground hard and rolled towards the stampeding turkey man. I grabbed one of his legs and yanked hard, forcing him to trip and fall forward. Scott was lying face down at the foot of the stairs, groaning. A wooden handle protruded from his back. "Scott!" I yelled as I got up and ran to the stairs. I yanked on one of his arms and could see what looked like an axe head partially buried into his upper right back. He managed to stand up on shaky legs and we hurried up the stairs, the turkey man stirring behind us. I had to let Scott lean on me as we hit the first door. The old lady was down the hall from us, holding a butcher knife. I let go of Scott, left him leaning against the wall and ran towards her and flung my leg out, sweeping her legs out from under her. She collapsed easily into a pathetic pile and I stomped on her wrist until the knife came loose. Scott was slumping towards the floor and the basement door suddenly burst open, followed by a loud, god-awful gobbling. I grabbed Scott's ankle and drug his body towards the front door, the axe falling out in the process. Behind Scott, Tom Turkey flapped his arms and shook his head while the beef curtains of his neck quivered. I started hollering for Christy to call 911 and to get the machete. I made it back to the porch to find a stunned Christy standing by the truck, rooted in place. Glancing back, I saw he was up on us and raised one of those deadly legs. He slashed it across Scott's face, a neat red line appearing for only an instant across his cheek and the bridge of his nose before it gaped open and started pouring blood. "Holy fuck!" I screamed and yanked Scott's leg as hard as I could, pulling him down the front porch steps. Turkey Man leapt off the porch, higher than I could have thought possible, and just for a moment, I could swear he was flying. Everything was in slow motion as I saw his terrible body careen through the air towards me, his clawed legs jutting out. I dove towards the grass. Christy was finally moving towards the truck and Turkey Man landed behind me. She opened the door and fumbled around my back seat and spun around suddenly. There she was, standing like a vision of pure beauty, a Valkyrie wielding the blade of my salvation. She raised it high above her head with both hands, brought it down forward, and it sailed through the air magnificently, end over end and straight into the ground. I scrambled forward, Turkey Man on my heels. Christy was hunched over in the truck again. What was she getting now? Cell phone?
Duck!
She yelled. No, turkey, I thought, but did as I was told. She swung around, Scott's Gatorade bottle in her hand as a deluge of brown spit flew through the air in a perfect arc. It splattered all over Tom's face and eyes, blinding him. I reached into the back of the truck and hoisted up one of the cloth grocery bags by the handles. Using my best hammer throw form, I stepped forward with the hefty bag, swung around a few times and swung it towards his head. He ducked. I couldn't stop the ensuing momentum and the bag continued its motion and straight into Christy's head. The collision sounded like the clack of pool balls, but 10 times louder. A glassy look appeared in her eyes, and she began to wobble like a boxer that had just been pounded in the temple. I reached for her as she crumpled to the ground, her head striking the curb. Behind me, Turkey Man gobbled triumphantly, his head raised towards the sky and his waddle fluttering. I pulled out a can of cranberry sauce and hurled it at him. It smoked him straight in the throat and he stumbled backwards, choking. I shouldered him into the yard and swung the frozen turkey down onto his head like a sledgehammer. I swung again and again and again. A crowd began to form. Soon there wasn't much of his head that was distinguishable, just bloody pulp and pieces of stuff staining the brown November grass. But still I slammed and slammed until they pulled me away. It wasn't what it looked like, you see. 3 dead bodies and me the responsible party for 2 of their deaths. But Christy was an accident. I didn't mean for her to die. She simply got caught in the crossfire. Her head hit the curb just right and she suffered a brain bleed. Lingered on life support for days until they finally pulled the plug. Her parents, heartbroken by the tragedy, found me as a likely scapegoat. Why was she riding around with Scott and I that day and not her girlfriends? Surely I had an excuse for what I had done to Mr. Turkey. I was afraid for my life and did what I felt I had to do to preserve it. Yes, it's true I had gotten carried away there at the end, but you must consider what it was I had seen. And what about Scott? Dead from blood loss and a pneumothorax caused by some sort of sharp implement. The only weapon found at the scene was a machete that belonged to me, and somehow Scott's blood had ended up on the blade. No axe or ankle razors were found. I think the old lady got rid of them somehow in the chaos. They didn't find any bodies in the basement either. Had I imagined that leg sticking out of the deep fryer? Even to this day, I feel there was some sort of cover-up. Prosecution painted me as a child of privilege, killing his friend and the girl he was crushing on in a jealous rage, all the while terrorizing the poor in some sort of hate crime, breaking a little old lady's arm and bludgeoning to death a disabled man with severe physical deformities. They say I'll get out a few years early for good behavior, but in the grand scheme of things, it's little consolation. Every Thanksgiving, they serve us a special little meal in the cafeteria. Canned corn and greened beans and dry stuffing from a box. And 2 slices of microwave turkey with brown gravy. God, I can't stand turkey. Thank you for listening. You can probably handle another horror story, right? A red flag with a crescent and star hung from a pole that was mounted on one... Oh my god, Turkish flag.